So ancient Rome, spoiler alert, it's all logistics. So they created mile markers on all their roads. They had ports. They had infrastructure like aqueducts. They had inventory and warehouse management for 1 million inhabitants in Rome at the time. Logistics is a small function within the supply chain. It's powerful, it's big, it's all the containers that move globally. It's
MCG, Making Communities Great.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Raisa Afrida. Most people think wealth is created by products, but behind every product, every company, and every economy, there is something much bigger happening, a value chain. The way we design it, govern it, negotiate it, protect it, and lead it can decide whether a business grows, whether communities stay resilient, and whether countries remain competitive. Today, we're excited to welcome back Stephanie Forbes for her second appearance on Legacy Podcast. Stephanie is the founder and CEO of the Forbes Group, bringing more than 25 years of experience in supply chain, procurement governance, regulatory compliance, and large-scale transformation. Her work sits at the intersection of strategy, governance, execution, helping organizations navigate complexity from regulatory pressure and geopolitical disruption to ECG requirements, supplier risk, ERP transformation, traceability, and value chain resilience. Stephanie also speaks globally on value chain design, strategic negotiation, governance, inflation pressure, and global disruption. Her book, Global Wealth, Local Impact: How Supply Chains Build Thriving Companies, Cultures, and Countries. It expands on a powerful idea. When value chains are built well, they do not just move goods, they build stronger companies, stronger communities, and stronger economies. So, hello, Stephanie. Welcome back to Legacy Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Raisa, and thank you again for having me on your podcast.
No problem at all. You know, you're the first guest that we have brought in again because there's just so much to learn from you. Your book just came out. And before we start our questions, how do you feel about this? Are you excited?
I'm super excited. It is just an absolute gift to be back here with you today, and I am really excited to getting into this chat.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Well, let's get in. You know, since your last podcast till now, what has changed in the world and in your life?
Oh, wow. That's a really loaded question. So many things have changed. I think the biggest change that we can say from a sort of a global perspective is geopolitics have really ramped up, and we have a lot of geopolitical events and activities that are constantly rewriting the map when it comes to trade, how we trade, who we trade with, the cost of trade, and all those related things. So, yeah, I'd probably, if it was a single answer for you today, and I know you like single answers, it's probably geopolitics. Geopolitics is really the biggest thing that has changed since we last spoke.
And about your life, you got your first book out. That is amazing.
So in my life, the book was just published in May of 2026 here, and really excited. Had a great experience with the publisher. It's everywhere, so you can listen to it on all the audio platforms. You can get a downloadable e-version, and you can buy it from almost any online retailer.
That's amazing. You know what? I was in your book publishing day. You were signing the book, and we actually have it here with us. I also saw that you're not only talking about your book within the country, but outside the country too. So
this is true. Yes.
Great job on that.
Thank you,
Stephanie. You say global wealth is not created by products, but by value chains, and you talked about it in your book. Can you explain that in simple terms? What that means?
Absolutely. So anytime you exchange something, you create value. The transaction is inherently valuable. So if I buy raw materials from you and then I put it through a process and I come out with a finished product, that exchange creates a level of value that then I pass on to the next person in the value chain, which could be an end consumer or another business. And in really simple terms, every time you have an exchange, you have the option to make it really frictionful, which is a tariff, creates a lot of friction in trade, or frictionless. And so frictionless are things like zero trade barriers or common paperwork, different things like that all help create a more efficient value exchange. And the goal is if I can exchange things of value more efficiently, I can move more business through an economy. And in really simple terms, if you take the GDP of nations, that's a direct metric or KPI, key performance indicator, of how well your value chains are moving. If your GDP is going up, you're doing well. It means that you're fairly efficient at trading goods. If your GDP goes down or becomes stagnant, you've got barriers to efficient and effective trade or moving through your value chain.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. And my next question is also about the value chain. If it is designed well, and you talk about, like how companies can save money, but what's beyond saving money?
Well, money doesn't help you when you can't get it.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, you're right.
So part of the space what we're in right now is availability of items or the predictability of when you can get something. And so we had a really predictable supply chain for a long time. We had really big globalized supply chains that were fairly efficient and highly predictable. And in the last little bit, probably since COVID, what has happened is we have lost our ability to predict. And when we lose our ability to predict, we struggle with forecasting our manufacturing. We struggle with keeping our inventory where it needs to be for our customers. We struggle with how much things are going to cost. Because maybe we end up buying a whole bunch of inventory that then sits for too long. And then we impact our financials as an organization. So it's really important that we value things other than money. Yes, cash is king, but again, there's certain things that are really, really important, like the ability to get something on time, the ability for it to meet a quality metric, the ability to service your customers with whatever it is that you're trying to deliver in a reasonable time frame. And so those things all become quite impactful. So again, in a nutshell, it's predictability.
That's interesting. And I would love to ask you about something. I'm sure you have been, you are an expert. You have more than 25 years of experience in global operations, supply chain, not only in Canada, but outside the country. You know a lot about the global situation of it. And we at MCG Career College, we offer this diploma. It's called Global Operations and Supply Chain Diploma, which got recently accredited by Supply Chain Canada.
That's right.
Yay. And thank you so much for guiding us through this process. Many of our students have this question when they think about signing up for the program, and they're like, maybe supply chain is it's like a back office function. How wrong or backdated that mindset is. Can you break this, break the ice?
Absolutely. So for a long time, so they would view warehousing and logistics as a back office, physically being behind the offices, receiving a good, putting it on a shelf. And part of the problem is that supply chain is not just logistics. Logistics is a narrow little wedge that lives in the whole gigantic picture of supply chain. And when we take supply chain holistically, and we take the whole big picture of it, it is how every business functions. It is actual business optimization and risk management. That is what a professional supply chain individual does, is they optimize the business function through the, relatively, on time or appropriate timing of receipt of whatever it is that you need, making sure the quality programming is embedded within the contractual relationship, making sure the metrics are met, reviewing performance of a vendor or a supplier, and then making sure ultimately wherever that is going also receives the appropriate feedback. This was great, it worked well, or oh my goodness, we have a problem with it. Now we have a warranty item. So all those things, everything is encompassed by the supply chain of things, whether it's moving things around, making sure the contracting is in place, or making sure that you have the appropriate certificates from an environmental perspective. Maybe it's critical or rare earth minerals. And so when you take all of those things in aggregate, it is really how well does your business function in the way of doing business.
Wow, that's so much more than just working in a warehouse.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not just this tiny little wedge. It's how do we get the raw materials to make our thing? Then after we make it, how do we make sure that it meets all the quality, regulatory, legal requirements? How do we make sure that the right margins are applied? Do we have the right cost of goods sold? Have we put in, any additional costs like transportation or inspection or customs, duties, tariffs, countervailing duties, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that we kind of go, oh, that's not my job. That's kind of over here. And the reality of it, it's actually all one job, but because it's quite complicated, we've parsed it out into little niches and little areas of specialty, but holistically, it's all one big web that all has to function together. And when we have breakdowns in little chunks of it, so we'll pick on importation of goods right now because it's pretty hot in the media, right? When we can't import something the way that we used to, and we add a layer of friction, it really, really impacts our ability to do the job. But no one's going to tell you that, our inability to manage our importation because of all these tariffs, that's just a back office function. No, that's front and center on every CEO's desk. As soon as there's an announcement about a tariff change or a regulatory update or some other level of requirement or change to the requirements, it moves top of the food chain. And so we really have to think about, how are we going to navigate this whole new big picture together holistically, and then recognizing that the whole function is not back office. The whole function is how optimized is your business for results.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know what? We're going to share this podcast to all the people who are interested in getting their career built up in this field. I think this is a great insight for them that opens more door to them, even with AI that's coming in right now. There's so many software that helps you match with the right optimization strategy that, okay, if we do this thing at this time, maybe it will be cheaper for us, or, it would be easier for us to ship those raw materials in certain time, right? It's vast. It's amazing to hear that. And talking about those intersections, I know that you work at the intersection of strategy, governance, and execution. Why do companies need all three to survive disruption?
So strategy, governance, and execution are key pillars for resiliency. And so when we think about building anything, right, you always start with a foundation. And if we don't have a good strategy, like what direction are we physically going, you're just going to wander around and you may or may not end up at your destination. So we have a lot of regulatory frameworks. Example is the Forced Labor and Child Labor in Supply Chain Act in Canada. We have other requirements like critical and rare earth mineral reporting. We have regulated substances, and these all relate to how we function and move. So that's part of your governance piece, is being on side with the rules of law and regulation. And then when we think about execution, well, if we don't get something done, if we don't deliver the goods, if your last mile delivery doesn't work, we're actually not participating in the supply chain. You actually have to deliver it still. So that execution piece is really around like delivery, like in whatever aspect that happens to be for your particular space. So those are foundational. Those are all foundational to how we build resiliency within any organization. And when we also look at those spaces and places in terms of strategy, governance, and execution, it's going to bring up risks. And so part of the other place in there is we evaluate those against risk profiles. And that helps you navigate through all of this disruption and helps build resiliency within your supply chain that then allows you to be more effective And we say profitability, but it isn't necessarily just profitability, but it's survivability in today's business. You want to, make sure you can keep the lights on, and margin will follow. But there are a lot of organizations right now that are having a hard time because everything has changed so quickly, and it's requiring a lot of effort, energy, manpower, cost, etc., to pivot to what the new reality is.
That's so interesting. Stephanie, while you were talking about it, I was just thinking, currently, right now, we're shooting this podcast in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. And Alberta is very much dependent on energy, right? And when we look at just recently, when there's global problems like wars and stuff, how supply chain affected our livelihood. If the gas price is going up, so many other things are going up, right? We recently got to know that we will be having an AI data center, Meta AI data center in Alberta. That, when we're thinking about building something, again, we're thinking about how are we going to bring in the raw material and all those kind of things. Anything wherever we think about building or creating a product or service, there's always thinking how is this going to come together? So there's so many things. This is very interesting. Now, you talked about resilience. So what does truly resilient value chain look like in today's world?
In one word, optionality. Having the ability to have options. If I only have one supplier who brings me my one thing and it's critical to my operations, and that one supplier can't get it to me because of a war, because maybe there's a port issue, or maybe there's an environmental issue, maybe there's an avalanche or a tsunami or a hurricane, all very real natural disaster items in today's world. If I don't have another option, I'm stuck. And so does that mean I'm shut down for a period of time? Does that mean I can't fulfill orders? Does that mean I go out of business? So in today's world, being resilient is really about making sure that you have good options. And again, cost is not the ultimate factor. If I need to pay 5% more to keep my operation running, so I can deliver to my customers, I'm probably going to pay 5% more. It sucks. I probably don't want to. And that cost then is going to get passed on as a result of the process of the cost of goods moving up. But at the end of the day, making sure that making sure that you can continue operating is your primary goal.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those things. Resilience is very important. And I never could think about optionality could be resilience, because we do see a lot of import that we have to do in Canada. And if we don't have options that we are only buying from a certain country, then we're in trouble. Now, here comes another problem that we're facing right now. Some new tariff just came in, right? So with inflation, geopolitical instability, and regulatory pressure, what are leaders underestimating the most right now? What do you think?
So right now, I think most leaders are relying on a status quo of the days of old, going, it'll eventually be predictable again. We just have to get through this season and we'll get back to something being predictable. But the old world order and predictability don't exist anymore. And so what we're seeing is a remapping of our supply chains, of our partners. And I just want to expand on a point you just made in your comments about resiliency. And when we import or export only to one or two or few places, and we don't have, again, optionality of, buying or selling to multiple spaces and places and destinations and countries, we really limit our ability to be the most effective at getting the best value for what it is that we're trying to do. And then it also, in terms of a country, if we don't have the ability to work with different markets, it impacts our GDP when we have problems. And we've seen that. That's been very consistent over the last little while, that, our GDP as Canadians is going to continue to suffer until we figure out how to have more partnerships and suppliers as well as buyers. Those things become really important. When it comes back to the inflationary and the geopolitical instability right now, and that predictability piece, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and being able to pivot quickly and come up with new strategies and really having a lot of good relationships with people all over the world is going to become key as we move into this sort of next phase of global remapping. By 2030, everything is going to look a fair bit different than how it does now.
Wow, that's so true. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, Stephanie, while you were talking about it, I just remembered something incredible. So, MCG College has different programs. We have medical program, business, arts, design, and supply chain.
Yes.
And I work with a great marketing team who creates lots of ads for promotional reasons and also to reach out to the right students, right? One of our very most popular video was actually made by you, where you were talking about building Canada's next supply chain. And it had like millions of views. So we were like, what just happened that out of all the ads, all the videos we made, like everyone is clicking on that video? That means people in Canada are actually thinking about building Canada's own supply chain so that we can trade within the within our borders and without barriers, right? And it's a very hot topic. So the ads we created about talking about tariff or talking about building Canada's own supply chain, I see that more people are engaging with those. So it's very thought-provoking. And I'm so happy that the book came out on the right time when all this geopolitical situation is happening. Now, one little story that I want to tell you, and then I want to ask you a question about it. It is very close to my heart because before coming to Canada, I was in Bangladesh, and we are known in the whole world for our ready-made garments.
Yes, you are.
So most of the clothes we're wearing in Canada, often they're coming from South Asia, and most of them do come from Bangladesh. And I was a newscaster back home, and when I was reading the news, suddenly there was a breaking news. And that was a very bad news.
It was sad.
So it was a Rana Plaza collapse, where thousands of factory workers, they were working overtime to build right before Black Friday, a lot of clothes for Western world. And, companies ask for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so the company or the owners of these garments, they're like, okay, we need to make these people work longer hours and keep working so we can, serve the Western market. And that also helps our country's GDP economy. And that actually puts food to people's plate who are making all these beautiful clothes that we are wearing. Now, thousands of people died. And from that time, there was a huge conversation around the world about the right way of, employing people, their protection, their environment, and all those kind of things. So it's very important. We always talk about these things because lots of people lost their lives. Now, when it comes to ESG and modern slavery reporting, which is becoming a bigger issue day by day, how can companies move beyond checking boxes and build real accountability?
So first off, I think it's important to acknowledge there are a large number globally of those types of events that occur where people lose their lives in conditions that are not safe, obviously. And you have children, being forced into labor. You have people that are basically locked in rooms until they meet their quotas, or sometimes they never get to leave those rooms. Those are horrific conditions and unacceptable on any level, period, globally, period. And we as leaders in our organizations need to ensure that we do not participate in that, period. So you had asked, how do you move beyond checking boxes? Well, that's called comprehensive due diligence. That's not asking them to fill out a form and signing it, having their CFO sign it and send it back. Because organizations that participate in modern slavery or, those types of slavery items, they don't care. They'll sign whatever and send it back. They're not interested in whether or not it's true. So you physically have to get on site. You physically have to go and see those facilities. You have to talk to the people. You have to physically see the paperwork. If you don't speak the language, then you need to bring translators with you. And you need to make sure that you do a comprehensive review, and then you need to do spot checks to make sure that it is what it says it is. There's a large number of organizations that do various types of due diligence reporting and have a lot of fact-checking around different factories and facilities globally. And there's a litany of those. If anyone wants to DM me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to provide some options for them. But there are a lot of organizations that do provide those services. It's really important to note, though, that it doesn't matter who you hire as a third-party due diligence provider. You as an organization have got to value that you stay within those regulatory lines and that you do not participate, and you actively screen your suppliers and you actively remove suppliers that behave inappropriately or cause their staff to be treated inappropriately or against the regulations. So that's really in today's world, if you're not completing comprehensive in-person due diligence with a lot of actual fact-checking and reviewing physical documents and talking to physical people, you're going to just end up as another story, no different than what happened with you in Bangladesh.
Absolutely. And that reminds me, during my MBA at University of Calgary, it is on global energy and sustainable development. And we were always taught that wherever you're building, or even if it's a supply chain or company that brings in oil and gas or something, you have to think about the environment, you have to think about the people of the land, take their guidance, and then create a sustainable strategy that can last long altogether. So thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate. Now it's a lighter question for you. So what is one supply chain myth you wish you could just delete from every boardroom forever?
Oh, it's the response. Oh, you mean like it's just logistics? So I still get that, actually. People are like, oh yeah, like you do logistics. I'm like, no, like logistics is a small function within the supply chain. It's powerful, it's big, it's all the containers that move globally. It's, it's moving trucks and last mile delivery. Like it's really, really, really big, but it's one component. And so I think having a more holistic view of what's included, and then it starts all the way at the very beginning when it comes to like, what's your strategy? And it's all the way at the end, which is, are we part of a circular economy? Are we creating waste that's going to come back and bite us? Are we, delivering on what we say we're going to deliver to our consumer? And so recognizing that it's actually the full life cycle of whatever it is that you're doing. It isn't just one delivery item. It's everything. It starts at the strategy and it goes to end use.
So do you get to explain that in the boardrooms, just like that? That guys, stop saying this.
I use slightly different. I'll be like, so I think there's a little bit more than just logistics in this, is usually how I answer that question. But yes, that is the one thing that I would like to sort of break everyone free from, is that, yes, logistics is a very valuable, very large component. It is just a component, though. And there is so much more to it that you need to factor in when you're contemplating what does your supply chain do? What does your value chain add? And how are you going to get to that sort of next step in terms of margin contribution or circular economy or whatever that goal happens to be for your organization?
That's great to know. And you know what? I just hope this myth actually goes away, because many of our students also ask this type of question. They're like, oh, are we going to work in logistics? Are we going to be a logistics manager and that's it? And I'm like, no, there's so much more.
There really is so much more. And yeah, it's kind of, you got to kind of break open the nut and be like, look, it's way bigger. And get people to really understand that it's quite vast and there's so many pieces to it. It's also one of the reasons I wanted to write the book, because I wanted to demystify a few things, and I also wanted to help people with some frameworks. So as they're going through really complicated scenarios, they would have some tools so that they could come up with their own answers. And I think that's really important, is having the tools to be able to navigate your current set of circumstances.
That's thank you so much for elaborating on that. Now, I do want to ask you something about your book. Okay. We have your beautiful book here. It's called Global Wealth, Local Impact. And I know that we want people to read about this book, but before they do, I want to know, what is that one message that you want to tell people that this book is all about, so that, it excites them to read more?
Well, first of all, I tried to make it really fun. So I actually talk about ancient Rome, I talk about the Silk Road, I talk about the East India Company, and I talk about how they're the origin story for a lot of our things. So ancient Rome, spoiler alert, it's all logistics. So they created mile markers on all their roads. They had ports, they had infrastructure like aqueducts, they had inventory and warehouse management for 1 million inhabitants in Rome at the time. So they created quality control on the amphorae, so seals to protect the quality of the olive oil, as an example. So they were pioneers in the space of logistics. A lot of things that they developed thousands of years ago, we still use today. Then we think about the Silk Road. The Silk Road was amazing. They were masters at networking. They knew all different trade routes. They did currency conversion. They converted different types of currencies from all over the world. They also did quality control and prevented fraudulent silk. It was even a thing back in the day.
Wow.
From being traded. They had dispute resolution. They had letters of credit. So you weren't traveling around with 1 million coins of gold with your camels that somebody, bandit would steal from you. So they would wander around with a scroll that was a letter of credit from one region to another. And then lastly was the East India Company. So that's the modern corporation, is built off the East India Company, and that's the one out of Great Britain. So they were a royal charter, and they started off in the early 1600s. And by the time they were done, they were a $4.9 trillion organization. So think about Walmart, Amazon, and the U.S. Navy all doing their thing. That's how big they were. And they were masters at vertical integration. They created the modern corporate reporting in terms of like financial reporting, the modern stock or like individual share for your portion of an organization. And it was the origin story of insurance. So Lloyd's of London Coffee House was the first insurance provider to the East India Company. So there's a lot of really great, interesting things there. There's also a few perils. So and I'll leave that for the readers, there's also a few things that maybe we shouldn't do that again because it didn't turn out so well. So after I make it a little bit fun, then I build out some frameworks. And these frameworks are helping anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or you run a paint store. They're frameworks for navigating uncertainty, and it takes you through the gamut. So depending on where you're at, you might have 10 things that you take away, you might have 20 things that you take away, but it's basic frameworks and questions to ask for how you want to go through whatever that next phase is for you and your business, and how you want to come out with maybe better information, you want to be better prepared, or ultimately you just want a better outcome.
Oh my God, there's so much to learn from you and from this book. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing that. And when you were talking about the history and me coming from, which is Bangladesh, back in those days, we were part of India. We saw how businesses were done. We were one of the largest continent that I would say the most wealthiest one back in those days when it comes to global trades, right? And sometimes when we look at trades, and you talked about human rights and stuff, right? How to do the trades in a right way, not bringing in colonization and more suffering. So I read a lot about that how business could be a tool of also oppression, but also you can do the opposite thing, right? If you do it right. So I absolutely love that. And Stephanie, I love what you do through also Supply Chain Canada. You are educating so many students. You were our keynote speaker during our graduation ceremony. And I saw how you spoke about your inspiration, personal life struggles, and where you are today. So my last question to you, and my favorite question to you today, is about your legacy. This podcast is called the Legacy Podcast, and we can clearly see how you're building your legacy. But one question I must ask, that when people look back at your work, would you hope they say that Stephanie has helped change, and how organizations understand those value chains?
So I think I help people solve the problem of ambiguity. So when they look at what's happening in the world, or they look at what's happening in their business, and they go, I have no idea what to do next. This is super ambiguous. This is crazy. This is confusing. I have no idea what's happening. Like, I would pivot, but I don't even know what to pivot to. I'm hoping that my work helps them go, hey, I have got a tool set that I can apply along with my critical thinking to solve any problem. And now I feel empowered. I feel like I can solve anything, and that I feel that there is a way to move forward. Because what happens is if we don't feel like we have enough tools to move forward, we stay stuck. And that can really feel awful. And so if I can help by sharing some tools with a wider audience that helps them feel unstuck and have some clarity and be able to solve their own problems in real time, then we all succeed better together. And that is why I named the book, Global Wealth, Local Impact, is because if we can all have the ability to solve our own problems in real time, even these really complex supply chain ones, we will immediately impact our local space and place. So whether that's I now have more resources for my family, my business does better, I can hire more people, I can give back to my local community, I can help others, I can mentor others, I can, whatever that fill in the blank is for you, having the ability to move through that in real time gives you just so much more options and gives you much more prosperity.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love seeing how you're building your legacy. You're making positive remarks around you, and you're making a positive impact on those people's lives. So now I do want to ask you, what if our audience wants to ask you more questions? How can they reach out to you?
Oh, great question. So my website is theforbesgroup.ca. There are 1,000,001 contact me links on there. Fill out the form and we'll get back to you.
Perfect. And also they can reach out to you on LinkedIn, right?
Absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You just search up Stephanie Forbes. My website also has a link to connect to LinkedIn. But you can send me a DM or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for being here today. Once again, I really, really appreciate you making time despite your very busy schedule, flying around the world and talking about your books. I really hope this opens many more doors for our future generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure once again.
Thank you. Well, my dear friends, you guys have been watching us so far. If you want to reach out to her, now you know how to reach out to Stephanie Forbes, who comes with more than 25 years of experience. She's an expert in supply chain, and more importantly, she is making communities great around her. So stay tuned for another inspiring leader who's building her or his legacy. Till then, bye-bye.
MCG, Making Communities Great.